So before I tell you about my plan, though, we also need a quick look at our planet and how land is being used. Well, 71% of our planet are oceans, 29% land. Of all of our land, 71% is considered habitable, the rest being desert and glaciers. So that's what we're going to focus on. One half of this habitable land is used for agriculture, one half. 11% is considered unusable shrubland, and 1% is taken up by freshwater lakes and streams. Of all the land on Earth that's used for agriculture, which is a little over 5 billion hectares, which is about 20 million square miles, of all that land, almost 80% is used for animal agriculture, land for grazing livestock and crops to feed them. Only 20% is used to grow plants for us to eat. But 82% of all the food calories eaten worldwide comes from that 20%. And please also pay particular attention to the fact that only 1% of all habitable land on Earth is being used for urban development. 1% that I just circled on the screen. Certainly, we can't use urbanization or urban sprawl as an excuse anymore for us running out of land on Earth. Again, the problem we have is not the number of people on Earth, it's what we're eating. So now onto my solution to this one portion of global depletion, which is climate change. Once again, out of all the land on Earth that's used for agriculture, 80% is used for grazing livestock and crops to feed them. That's a little over 4 billion hectares, which is almost 10 billion acres. Well, many researchers now agree what I had first proposed over a decade ago, that we could grow enough food to feed the human population today and into the next 20 years on less than 1 billion hectares. Thus, we can stop all animal agriculture, remove all livestock from all grazing lands, and convert those 4 billion plus hectares back to forests by reforestation or natural regeneration. In short term, over the next 5 to 7 years, this would meet and exceed every country's methane reduction pledge. And by 2050, with more than 4 billion hectares reforested, we would also be able to sequester or pull down all the excessive greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide from where we are today at 420 parts per million, closer to the historical levels of 277 parts per million, where we were for the past 10,000 years, and our Earth was much healthier. Inspired by the 1977 Green Belt movement, the World Wildlife Fund joined BirdLife International and Plant for the Planet in 2018 to begin the Plant a Trillion Trees program, which then became even a larger movement 2 years ago when the World Economic Forum created 1T, an initiative for businesses, governments, and civil society to support this effort. Many others, such as my friend Jane Goodall, have also joined in on this movement. It's a wonderful idea on some levels, not so good on some other levels. The goal is for us to plant 1 trillion trees by the year 2030, which seems good on its surface. Nowhere, though, in any of these mission statements is there any mention or emphasis on food choice, eliminating meat and dairy from one's diet. And yet that's the primary reason we need to plant trees, isn't it? Yeah, we've been eating the wrong food all these years and had to cut down forests because we're running out of land to support this bizarre animal breeding and killing diet. Planting 1 trillion trees initially then sounds good, but it's essentially meaningless if the world continues to eat animals and animal products and thereby continues to deforest or misuse our resources while we're out running around planting trees. So this movement also over-focuses on planting a certain number of trees rather than placing the focus where it needs to be, I think, which again is just stop eating meat, stop deforesting, and then properly restoring all grazed and deforested land back to their near original state. For instance, if we restored the 4 billion hectares that we talked about a few slides ago, used for grazing livestock with plant-based agroforestry or simply natural regeneration, after 10 to 20 years, there'd likely be 1 to 2,000 trees growing per hectare, multiplied times those 4 billion hectares, which would equal about 8 trillion trees, not 1 trillion. Again, and this could potentially sequester or draw down greenhouse gases somewhere between 108 and 181 gigatons of carbon equivalent greenhouse gases per year. It's pretty astounding. And then there are mangroves. Well, what are those? Well, these are critical coastal ecosystems that buffer communities against extreme weather events. They're so very important. They slow down erosion. They foster so much wildlife and biodiversity. And next to peatlands, mangroves store more carbon than any other vegetation on Earth. We have lost half of the world's mangroves in just the last 50 years, 32 million hectares. More than one half of this terrible loss is due to aquaculture and shrimp farming. And mangroves can sequester or pull down up to 4 times more carbon dioxide from our atmosphere than tropical rainforests do. So let's stop eating fish and stop eating shrimp, at least shrimp and fish from aquaculture settings. We'll talk more about fish and shrimp from our oceans tomorrow, or excuse me, on Tuesday. And let's begin reforesting 32 million hectares of mangroves, which would then sequester another 4 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases per year. So how important is food choice in climate change? We're currently pumping in 64 gigatons of carbon equivalent greenhouse gases into our atmosphere each year. If we converted all global cropland that's currently growing crops to feed livestock and converted all pasture land with grazing livestock to plant-based agroforestry systems producing food for us to eat directly, we find ourselves at a net negative greenhouse gas scenario. Complete mitigation, all greenhouse gases currently being emitted by all sources today could be sequestered into the soil, and the excess carbon dioxide that we've pumped in over the past 200 years could be pulled down. This would then bring back wildlife, bring back biodiversity, protect our soil, calm weather patterns. This is where optimism about climate change can be found. And this is without factoring in all the carbon sequestration from restoring desertified regions or our peatlands, mangroves, and other blue carbon projects in our oceans. As a result of climate change, rising seas are already causing island countries to disappear. Kiribati, yeah, and that's how you pronounce it, Kiribati, consists of 33 islands, all of them no more than 6 feet above sea level, 117,000 inhabitants. Maldives, population of 500,000 people, and 80% of the nation's islands are less than 3 feet above sea level, most of which will likely be underwater by the year 2050, setting up mass migrations and loss of islands that had existed for thousands of years. Micronesia, Fiji, Solomon Islands, and many more are just a few of the examples of what's being lost in our lifetime due to our actions and then our inactions. Now, why is this important? Well, because the devastating effects of climate change are disproportionate globally. Most of us in highly developed countries have never visited these places, likely don't know exactly where they're located or how to spell them, but all of these 58 small island developing states are losing their countries to rising seas due to climate change. Together, all these island countries, though, combined, are only responsible for less than 0.5% of all the human-induced global greenhouse gas emissions. This is a grave example of how the choices we make, particularly with food choice, right here in the United States, will have a profound impact on some other living beings somewhere else in the world. With every bite of an animal product, we are essentially taking a bite out of the life of these island countries and causing undue pain and suffering to those that live there. But again, we can change this. Oh, I see. Well, you need something closer to home. Rising seas are expected to devastate, if not wipe out, most of our coastal cities here in the United States by the end of this century. By 2050, just 27 years from now, 150 million people around the world will be displaced, losing their homes from rising seas and tides, setting up mass migrations inland. And that, by the way, that 150 million figure is very conservative. So to summarize the connection between food choice and climate change, we have this. Climate change is very real, it's worsening, and the situation's urgent, since we've already passed the timeline. Greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, anthropogenic, significantly affect climate change. Raising animals for us to eat is one of the largest, if not the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, it's the most important industry to eliminate. And lastly, any food movement away from factory farms, but including grass-fed or pastured animal systems, will not solve the problem. In fact, it'll make it worse. More land use changes, more deforestation, a higher feed conversion ratio, and more production of methane. 40 to 70% more methane is produced per one grass-fed cow as compared to grain-fed.